Welcome back, everyone, to the European VC podcast. As you know, most people look at the European tech scene and see fragmentation. They see a collection of disconnected hubs struggling to keep pace with the unified engine of Silicon Valley. But my guest today sees something entirely different. He sees a high-performance circuit board, a deep tech mesh that is uniquely built to solve the hardest industrial problems of our time. Today, Jeppe, my dear co-founder of EUVC Corporate, and I are sitting down with Julien Fredonie from Honda Xcelerator Ventures. We're discussing why the old software playbook is failing in hardware, why CVCs are the missing link to the industrial scale, and the specific human blind spots that's causing even the most sophisticated investors to miss the next industrial powerhouse.
This show is not investment advice, and the hosts of this episode may be invested in the funds and companies featured.
Julien, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Excited to be here again.
Yeah, but it's the second time we have Julien on. First time we spoke a bit about Honda, but this time we want to dive a bit more into the topics I just mentioned, which is, of course, the European deep tech moment and the mesh that is European deep tech. Tell me a little bit about why you're in love with Julien.
I think, first time around, it was very, very clear how knowledgeable Julien are. It's 9 months ago since we had you on the pod last time. And as I'm digging deeper into the venture landscape in Europe, Julien pops up here, there, and everywhere. A true community builder. So he's in there for the long run, and the good connection to our agenda here at the EUVC to, make tech and money available for the European tech founder. It's awesome to have you here again, Julien. I can't wait to do this with you.
You also are one of the managers of a WhatsApp group for deep tech investors in Europe. Is that true? Can you share that? Can we disclose it? Can people reach out to you if they want to join it?
Yeah, of course. I mean, WhatsApp group is one way of let's say, interacting among the community, but we also do a few things, and I'm very happy to be in touch.
And you have about 200 deep tech investors, am I right?
Yeah, exactly. So basically, we found out that many of us, CVCs involved in deep tech, share some similar topics. There are some overlapping topics. Also sometimes face similar challenges, and at the same time bring a lot of value to deep tech founders, universities, TTOs, etc. So our simple idea when we created that community now 2 years ago was definitely to bridge the CVCs and the best universities in Europe. So we organized also a few visits to Oxford, EPFL, ETH, etc., where we go as a group. And now it's also a kind of coordination layer where people can share deals, share some insights, etc. And now it's a very lively community of 200 CVCs involved in deep tech.
Julien, you've laid out 7 specific reasons why European deep tech is so attractive right now. Could you just walk us through those? Let's start with the big lines first, the 7 points, and then we can dive into each one of them afterwards.
To give a bit of context, I spent maybe 13, 14 years as a startup operator and founder, and I've been now in an additional 12 years in deep tech doing open innovation and CVT, basically. I believe that entrepreneurs, and especially deep tech entrepreneurs, can change the world. And I've always been a bit obsessed with what's next, what's the next big thing, the next big disruption, etc. So I don't play Pokemon Go, but instead I've been chasing startups for 25 years in one way or another. I have a kind of hands-on experience being involved in ecosystems in Paris, Berlin, Stockholm. And today I'm French in Berlin working for a Japanese CVC. Because as you mentioned, I run the Honda Xcelerator Ventures activities for Europe and Africa, where our mandate is to create strategic partnerships between deep tech startups and to invest. So we are involved in investments, in different types of collaborations, maybe 100 projects between R&D and startups every year. Each year up to 60 million that we invest in startups. So with my colleagues, our job is basically to explore at the same time the large ecosystems that we know, but also the emerging innovation ecosystems doing deep tech in Europe. And with those different experiences, I definitely saw a huge shift in how Europe is somehow building industrial champions and how Europe is well positioned today for deep tech. There is, I mean, already there is a Europe deep tech moment that we see, right? We are all aware of the long history of the Silicon Valley, of the playbook of the Silicon Valley, which is move fast, break things, which works for software. And I think deep tech and hardware is a bit different, right? So maybe the motto for Europe would be more move fast and fix things. And at the end, the strength of Europe is really to what we see today in around the deep tech is really about solving industrial problems that require deep science with some kind of some form of regulatory sophistication. So I think the first point, the first reason I believe Europe is highly attractive in for deep tech is definitely the understanding that deep tech is needed and that the deep tech startups from Europe can scale, right? So we see, I mean, there are many different reasons, right? Politics, geopolitical reasons, also some tough problems that we still need to solve around environment, sovereignty, health, etc., right? So to solve all of those problems, all of those challenges, we need deep tech. This is where deep tech shines, right? We see that there is a lot of public funding, more than 1 billion will be invested, I think, from the EIC in deep tech in 2026. And we see now some clear winners, right? I think in Europe we have almost 50 startups which have reached the unicorn status doing deep tech, right? So we can think about Mistra, IQM, Proxima, etc., etc. It's I think approximately 50 deep tech unicorn startups in Europe, and maybe almost 100 if you combine the unicorns and the 100 million revenue startups, right? So we see that Europe can scale those startups, and we see that the attractivity is also changing, right? When I engage with investors, financial investors or strategic investors from US or from Asia, I think the conversations flipped completely from why Europe to where in Europe, where to go in Europe. Should we go to London? Should we go to Amsterdam, etc. So I think now today the global VCs and the CVCs that are coming to Europe because they can find amazing startups with reasonable valuation, stability, some room for industrial innovation. So that's definitely point one. I think realizing that deep tech startups from Europe can scale, that they are attractive and that they are needed. That's already kind of deep tech moment which happened in the past years.
I also know that you are looking at the education ecosystem as particularly important, which of course also ties into your community that we discussed before. We're looking a lot to bridge the universities with the investor community. Can you talk a bit about the strength of European innovation, what you're seeing on the ground now in terms of innovation and business acumen with deep tech and deep tech founders versus in the past?
I mean, Europe has a very qualitative education in general, mostly free, very affordable, right? So that's already one good point for Europe. The top education around science and engineering is very, very high, right? Everyone knows about Oxford and all the, science type of education. Also on the engineering side, there is a very, very strong backbone of, tech universities everywhere in Europe. So all of this creates already a very good education a very good start from the academic point of view, let's say. But that's only the start, right? So as a deep tech founder, you need to be mastering science and also business, because this is what it is about, right? Bringing science to business. And we definitely saw in the past 5 to 10 years, a huge increase in the number of the programs which are supporting, scientists to become founders, right? And the impact is huge. You can go from low single digit number of PhDs going from research to entrepreneurship to low double digit, right? So from 2% to 12% PhDs will become founder when they have the appropriate support network and incubation, etc., etc. So all those programs from the universities, but also outside of the universities, company building, targeting PhDs, etc., they have a huge impact on the entry of the funnel, let's say. How many startups start their journey every year. And that has an amazing impact on the quantity of those companies, but also on the quality. Business viability is now also more supported by those programs, I would say. So second point is definitely the improvement of this educational, entrepreneurial education part in general, and especially in the universities that we saw.
Julien, could you talk a little bit to, now we have all these new, more founders that comes with this educational background. Could you talk a little bit to the team composition and how you see that evolving and how to be successful as a team in deep tech?
Yeah, definitely. I think this is something which is definitely required in terms of attention, right? So it's not only about the science and the product. I mean, that's a fundamental asset to develop. But at the end, the team which is doing this research and bringing this research into a product and this product into hopefully a business and hopefully a scalable business requires a very different type of organization, right? So I would say that the keyword here is diversity, complementarity, where you need to have a scientist working with an engineer, but also someone maybe with a kind of real life production or, plant experience, and maybe even ideally with a kind of business person. So in general, I think what was often missing in the maybe previous decade of deep tech was really this diversity. And today, from those educational programs, from those also the very early stage investors, I think have a role here. I think actually that could be number 3 of why Europe has an interesting opportunity right now. I think we see a new generation of GPs as well, which are coming up. We have, there are already some very established funds which have been doing deep tech for 10 years. They do a great job. There are a few generalist funds now getting interested in deep tech. What gets me very, very excited is the new deep tech GPs, which are often, solo GPs, small funds. They have engineering or science background, entrepreneurial backgrounds. They move fast. They understand hardware. So they are a bit different from the European VCs that we see usually in Europe from the SaaS type of industry. And they bring a kind of different energy. At the end, that's very important because the deep tech and hardware is hard. It's different. And you need to have a very strong alignment with the founder. And you need to be able to bring a very different type of specific support also to the founder, right? So either on the product side or being very deep in understanding some very specific industries like, semiconductors or computing, aerospace, etc. It's very niche, right? That's not something that you can make.
Are there any specific of these solo GPs that you would like to mention, highlight, and some of the investments that you found exciting that you've received from them?
So, okay, I will mention some new type of GPs that we find very interesting, their approach in their deal flow, etc., in their selection process. And of course, there are other ones that we like and that I will not mention because the list is very long. But I think in general, we have few funds like Høier doing semiconductor, so very, very niche. Prototype is doing a very good job as well in terms of moving fast and having some very interesting bets in France, very strong in AI, Visionaries Tomorrow, U2V, Unruly as well. So yeah, it's actually a lot of very cool, let's say, new generation of GPs coming up, I would say. Who would you mention?
But, there's so many great ones out there. I think what is super interesting for me is always to hear, what is it that you see and where do you pick it up, right? Because it also comes with the background and so forth. I think it's super interesting also to hear kind of the Honda approach, right? Because now we have corporates and CVCs in the game and the importance they play. And could you share a little bit about your view on that? What do you bring into this equation?
It also relates to the point 3 on the quality of or the new generation of the GPs. One thing that we like with them is definitely that they are comfortable with hardware. At the end, 60% of the value from venture will be created from hardware, and it's only a fraction of deployed capital today which is deployed in hardware, right? So at the end, this is also an area where the CVCs are very valuable, very comfortable, and very relevant when it comes to deep tech. They have, that's what we see in our small community of 200 CVCs doing deep tech. They have a lot of industry knowledge first, by definition. They have a very different understanding, or let's say complementary understanding of the success factors in their own industries. And they have a very strong technical understanding, right? So they bring a tremendous value in terms of being able to support those deep tech companies. They can bring engineering capabilities. We see that hardware is often a challenge of also supply chain and production. Most of those large corporates backing the CVCs, they have some experience, some skills, etc. They have some global sales channels that they can leverage as well. So for all these reasons, there is a huge fit, I would say, between deep tech and CVCs. The strategics, most of the time, are also very comfortable with long timeline, so patient capital, in addition to the strategic value that they bring. And I would say that from for a market, it's also a very strong signaling, right, to have relevant CVCs on your cap table, which can be partners or customers, maybe sometimes even suppliers of the ventures that they are investing in and financing.
Could you share, have you been able, because one of the bigger things in corporate venturing, right, is, what can the startups, leverage from Honda? Have you managed this far to make some good partnerships and sales channels for the startups in your portfolio?
Yeah, so I will not disclose any confidential detail, but at the end, when we invest, we have a clear plan of, or clear idea, at least, of what we would like to create as strategic synergies. Most of the time, we have several opportunities of collaboration, and they can be in different directions, right? So we usually have some form of course, operational support, also with our, let's say, portfolio or platform teams. So being able to support on supply chain or production, sometimes even a bit of engineering as well. We have very strong activities around maybe joint development as well sometimes, which is also very important for both parties, which can create a lot of value. This is usually a very strong motivation for us to have conviction in what we could do together as an investor, and maybe not as just I don't know, customer, for example, right?
And is that a plan from when you start looking at these companies as a part of your investment proposal and so forth, how you can collaborate, and how early do you do this with the startups, right? Because also you are deep tech investors, so it might take a little bit of time before the tech is ready to work with Honda.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is what we do most of the time from day one. When we engage, or when I engage with startups, it's really also about understanding what could be the strategic overlap and the strategic relationship we could develop. And we usually have a very detailed plan or ID plan, which goes for multiple years. And then, it's really about making sure that there is mutual value at each given time to create those partnerships and a mutual value creation, right? So it's a plan that we are also assessing or reassessing, which is also dynamic. Sometimes we have new ideas. Sometimes some priorities are found in one party or another. So it's really about creating this mutual trust, actually, to be able to have very openly those very strategic conversations. I mean, every CVC is very different, right? So this is what we see in our CVC community, that every CVC is different in how they work, how they operate, how the decision-making here is, etc. But what is very common to them is the strong value that they bring and the strong interest that they have in around deep tech. So for me, it's definitely the also one of 0.4 of why I'm very bullish about the European deep tech ecosystem.
I agree on that. And I think as the companies in your portfolio mature, right, there's also one of the points that you mentioned around growth capital. Could you share a little bit about your opinion on how the CVC and how they should play in the later stage rounds?
I think we come from that's a shift happened as well. I think here. I think we come from industry saying this lack sometimes of growth capital, starting at Series B as a funding gap. And I think today the industry understands that's actually a funding opportunity. So this gap is being filled. I mean, the funds have been created. Some other ones are being created at the moment. And there is a lot of appetite for those rounds, B, C, growth stage rounds for European deep tech. So that's something which changed already. It's not only the very early stage which is moving, the growth stage is moving. This is an area where the CVCs also have a lot of involvement within the past 1-2 years, that the CVCs are coming in average a bit later in the round. So maybe around Series B more than a Series A, as they were doing maybe couple of years ago. So there are definitely some opportunities now, let's say, in this field. I think what we have seen in the past years, maybe also in some companies that we have been working with closely, that it was very difficult to get 20 million, 30 million tickets in Europe 2 or 3 years ago. I mean, environment is of course still challenging, but those pockets now exist, they are identified, and they are looking also to deploy, right? So that's a huge shift.
Could you share also, just so we bring Honda into the equation, where do you play in the ecosystem? What stages do you invest into?
Yeah, definitely. So we invest from 2 to 10 million. So for us, that means starting at late seed to Series C or even D could be considered in different cases, right? Let's say lower limit for us is to have some kind of proof point, some kind of prototype, MVP. So ID stage is not the stage where we are active, but as soon as there is a kind of prototype, MVP, I think this is an area where we can start collaborating. And as I was saying, we are doing two things. One is the direct investments from 2 to 10 million. So that's one area of activity, and we are also running hundreds of projects between deep tech startups and R&D on our 4 topics of interest, which are sustainability, mobility, air, sea, land, and space, manufacturing, and advanced computing, robotics, and AI.
Now we see, I think you mentioned that the EIC is intending to invest 1.4 billion into deep tech related investments in 2026. How do you see the exit market coming from that, and what is needed in a European perspective to make this successful?
We were talking previously about unicorns, and of course this is not about unicorns, it's about exits, right? Innovation ecosystems, there are like physics or chemistry experiments. You have many parameters, and when you change just one parameter, you change the total output of the ecosystem, right? So one example is the French tech, actually. They have been able to change the narrative of, being an entrepreneur is risky to being an entrepreneur and running a startup is very cool. And doing so, that's not the only thing that they did, but that's a key impact that they created on the French ecosystem, right? And by just changing one parameter, they changed the overall output, right, of the ecosystem. And of course, the parameter which is the game changer is the exit, right? It creates an impact on basically all the other parameters. So it's the meta parameter by definition. You create, of course, multiple millionaires or billionaires overnight. You create new networks, you create know-how. So that's very important, right? You create the understanding that it's possible as well, to exit a startup from Berlin or from Stockholm, etc. So you you lead the way, right? And you create some vocation, etc. So exits, even on the cultural impact on the ecosystem, are very, very, very important. They are, I mean, we see that from IPO market is a bit different. We see that maybe SPAC is a bit coming back around deep tech, but also we saw in the past years a very growing, I would say, mutual maturity from both sides, right? So the exit is like two parts, right? So you need to have like mature startups, and you need to have appetite from the corporate, some kind of reinvention, urgency, etc. Both are high, and we see that the maturity of the company working, collaborating, creating strategic collaborations with the large corporates is also growing. Their understanding of how to manage the relationship with the corporate is also growing. And we see from the other side that the need for innovation and to build new industrial champions and to reinvent industrial champions, etc., has never been as high, right? So there is a real need for a lot of large corporates to acquire new innovation that is coming very well with the accelerated maturity of the companies, right? So I would say that it's exit market hopefully will be positive in the next years, probably driven by some SPAC, etc. on one side, but also with the growing activity from corporates.
Yeah, I was about to ask you a bit if you could tie all of this together, because you're basically saying here a list of the factors that are forming the strength of Europe, and you're calling that the European deep tech mesh. Am I correct that that's how you understand it, how you think about it, that by tying together, one, the moment in the market, two, the education ecosystem that we have around startups and birthing new startups and technology, and then you couple that with the early stage investors, the corporates and the CVCs, the growth capital, and finally the exit in the end. All of this is coming together to form what you're considering the European deep tech mesh. Yeah,
exactly. I see it as a kind of funnel from the education to the exit. The idea of the mesh comes from we hear often that Europe is too decentralized, that there are, too many hubs, it's complex to navigate, etc. And a few years ago, all those hubs were somehow competing, and how I think today they are more forming a kind of competition, right? So those networks, they are not completely disconnected, they are connected. The talents flow, the capital flow, the ideas flow, and there is something, there is something very unique also with Europe, right? It's mainly we are from a bit similar generation. We are Erasmus generation, so we know a lot of people who have been, multilingual, we lived here and there, who are culturally adaptive, and think pan-European, right? So
if I were to comment on that, I think you're absolutely right, both with the Erasmus generation, but there's also another thing, which is the COVID generation, or what COVID did to all of us, exactly. Becoming truly hybrid in how we work, feeling absolutely comfortable having relationships that are purely built online, and building companies that then would have research in one hub, and then you'd have your sales team in London, and you might have your back end in Southeastern Europe. Like, there's a lot of organization structures that would never have happened going 10 years, 15 back, that are now completely understood as, of course, this is how we're building.
Yeah, you're right. I forgot about this COVID thing, but that happened as well. And no, you're right. It has that's something we see a lot. It can look complex if you are maybe not into the ecosystems, deeply, because you can find an amazing startup in Slovenia or in the south of Italy, etc. That's the fun part, actually, like exploring also those emerging ecosystems. But yeah, this reality exists. I think it's also a question of framing. When I look at, London, Paris, Brussels, and Amsterdam, for me, it's almost the same line, right? So it's 4 different cities, but they are forming a kind of connection. So for me, it looks more like a circuit board with like connection, formal, informal, different levels of connection between the hubs than disconnected hubs all around Europe. So That where with the idea or the analogy of the mesh comes from.
You have a special view on, how CVCs evaluate teams and, a couple of blind spots that are there. Could you go into that dialogue with us?
Yeah, thanks. That's also an area where I'm very passionate about, so very happy to share. And at the end, it comes from many discussions with CVCs at the end, right? And I think what surprised us during those discussions was that many CVCs are very, very sophisticated tech due diligence processes. So they go very deep in the tech evaluation, understanding the tech, understanding the market, etc. We hear also a lot of our financial VC friends having some very sophisticated ways of evaluating teams. Everyone has a different framework, but at least everyone has a framework. Yeah, we realized in those discussions that sometimes CVCs have a few blind spots in terms of evaluating teams, right? So that's something I wanted to discuss. The first thing that we found out is that many CVCs evaluate mostly CEO and sometimes CEO CTO couple, right? So there is of discussion on the maybe academic background, etc., of the CEO and the CTO, like the founder pedigree of the founding team. But there is usually some blind spot, or often some blind spot on execution team, for example. So that's something which is very important. You want to, as an investor, you want to know also who would be responsible for, building and selling, etc. So that's one area where we heard already some kind of gaps. It's always interesting to think about also the key people who are maybe not on the slide. You have sometimes, especially early stage, before around Series A, you have one, maybe 2% who are like very, very important. Sometimes they have been involved in the product and then a bit of HR, etc. So they are holders of the culture somehow. And if those persons are have potential to grow, take also other positions, etc. That's someone who can have a lot of important also for the team, right?
Could you share a little bit, how do you approach that then with that view at Honda? So when you do your own due diligence, are there some specific areas that you do differently than you would have done 5 years ago just doing a standard venture investment?
I think one of the areas that we are looking at, I think that's also the fit, the CVC and startup fit, which is also a mix of cultural and behavioral and communication style, etc. We are doing deep tech. We are in a automotive context. We are patient capital, sometimes long timeline of development also from the startups. We are super tech driven, but we also need teams who can move fast within a very highly structured process, development process, flow, etc. There is usually a huge fit with startups which have a very engineering mindset, right? We usually speak the same language. So yeah, second point is definitely the CVC and the startup fit. One thing we can touch upon is also on the diversity that we were talking about previously, and this one is always a topic of attention, or should be a topic of attention for early stage deep tech founders as well.
How do you define diversity in that perspective? Is that gender diversity, or do you see it across geographies? How do you see the diversity in this way?
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. I'm talking about. Visible diversity is important, and I'm talking also about non-visible diversity. So it's about cognitive diversity, different professional backgrounds, different problem-solving approach, sometimes different industry experience. When you're, 6, 10 people from the same university, from the same background, same teacher, etc., I guess you have a great cultural alignment. Everyone understands each other. Everyone is, similar background. But probably as a deep tech founder, you want to bring together multiple domains, right? Because you want to be able to solve different types of problems. And I saw that multiple times, the impact of bringing someone with maybe, 20 years of experience, maybe in a different industry, but with very practical experience of building a physical product, running a plant, etc. Right? So this diversity in terms of profile, science, engineering, ideally a bit of sales understanding, and industry understanding at the end is key, and that's often something that founders are missing. So the point here is not, as a CVC, the point here is not to have some kind of diversity points, but more to engage in a healthy discussion with the founder about what can be the plan to achieve that. What can be the plan to make sure that you bring different types of profiles, different type of educations, different type of skills to make sure that your deep tech startup can thrive.
Julien, I know one of your key things is also coachability. Could you talk a little bit about this self-awareness with founders and how you see that?
This is also not new, I think, for financial investors. But the coachability is maybe, I mean, two things, right? It's really about the self-awareness. And this is very important because at the end, the deep tech founder journey is maybe 10 years plus journey, right? So the founders need to wear multiple hats. They need to evolve from being a scientist to become a business leader and then being able to raise funds, et cetera, right? So how can a founder articulate the blind spots? You know, how do they learn today? Do they have some kind of advisor, mentor, coaching activity? Do they proactively engage in some form of learning plans, et cetera? So all of these are, I would say, very important indicators as well on how the founder is able to evolve in a 10 years journey as well. So I think in general, it's not really, I mean, what I'm trying to have here is not to suggest a framework, but to remind that everyone should have a framework, including CVCs, that the team evaluation is definitely not a checklist, like, okay, is it the right university? Yes. That's an area where CVCs should also involve a lot of time, especially for early stage companies. At the end, the quality of the team is somehow the safety net for deep tech, right? Where you have some kind of engineering risk and product risk and etc. So the quality of the team is very important. CVCs should have their own frameworks, and at the end they should see it as a dynamic thing as well, right? So it's not a team evaluation process that you do pre-investment only and you take a snapshot, but also being able to see the full movie and how the team evolves and how the dynamic between the founders and the execution team, etc., evolve as well, right? So it's really about seeing the movie and not only just a snapshot picture, basically.
Julien, you've been in this space for a long time. You've been building the Honda operations within venture and tech for a long time. What would be your one final piece of advice for corporates that are looking to get involved in the tech and deep tech space?
First, start with the why. Understand why you want to do it, what you call success, what you want to achieve. And I think this is a key part of having, I mean, you have more chances to have successful operations if you already know where you want to go to. So spend time also on the why. And then when you have decided to do that, I think Europe is an amazing opportunity. There are hubs, there are communities, there are events which are bringing together corporates, investors, universities, founders, etc. Yeah, it's a huge opportunity. The European deep tech opportunity is real. So yeah, come and meet us. I don't know.
Absolutely. Beautiful. Julien, thank you.
Not sure what to say.
I think it's beautiful. Julien, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Thank you so
so much.
Thanks, Jeppe. Thank you, Andreas. See you soon.